Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Today's class we're going to be working through the main muscle groups associated with cycling. We'll be using a chair, 2 blocks, 2 blankets and a belt. And we're going to begin with our shins in a kneeling pose, similar to this one that I'm currently in, Quadriceps. Let's take 2 blankets and we'll use the blankets. So generally in yogastudios they'll come in this fold, and we can use that for shoulder stand, but today folding that in half this way. And try to fold your blankets as neatly as possible. We'll have 2 of the blankets folded that way. And we've got the neat folded edge, and we're going to be touching both of those neat folded edges together. So we're going to be kneeling on the blankets. We'll be letting our toes hang over the edge of the blanket here towards the floor. That's going to be helpful for people that are quite tight in that shin region. If that is the case, if you have got some stiffness there, it will also be helpful to have 2 blocks. You can have that either side of the blankets, and I'll show you how that will work in a moment. But let's come into the pose. So we're just kneeling down with our feet together, knees together, and positioning yourself on the blankets so that your toes hang over the edge of the blanket, the tips of the toes just lightly making contact with the floor. And the area there where the lower shin joins the ankle, we're looking to progressively bring down more firmly in contact with the blankets. Put your hands on your thighs. The hands, not just passive, they can press down onto the thighs so your shoulders roll back and your chest is lifting up. So for most people, this initial stage should be relatively accessible. If it's not, feel free just to stay and consolidate. We'll work with 3 increments that will gradually intensify the stretch into the shin. The next increment, all we do is just come forwards. So the toes, rather than hanging off the edge of the blanket, are now on the blanket, otherwise it's the same pose. All right. Mentioned the blocks. If you're struggling with this one, if you're finding that you're leaning forwards and that your lower shins are not easily making contact with the blankets, you can support your body weight with your arm muscles by just having the blocks there for the hands. That just gives you a little bit more control to just gradually, incrementally ease your body weight back until you then eventually get in that position, if possible, of having the hands onto the thighs. So by this stage we've got a nice straight connected line from the knees to the toes, a flat contact with the blankets. And for some people that might be still a position where there's not a lot of stretching occurring. It might be for you that there's a strong stretch, in which case you just stay and consolidate. Otherwise though, we bring the blankets apart. So we'll come up to do it. The distance between the blankets will vary from person to person. For me, it is a little bit less than the length of my own 2 feet. That might just give you a bit of a head start into getting the blankets in roughly the right position, and you can refine from there. And maybe I'll show before I come down. So I've got the toes here, and then the top of the foot. There's those knuckles where the toes join into the remainder of the foot, and we want those knuckles just on the edge of the blanket here. So the toes come onto the blanket, the remainder of the foot and the ankle and the lower shin, it comes down towards the floor, and we just position that knee blanket so that it's just a little bit under the knee region. And the knee blanket, a little bit, it's pulling the skin in that shin region towards the kneecap, and we can even just help that process with the hands, just stretching the skin there in the direction of the kneecap, 1 knee at a time, just pulling the skin in the direction of the kneecap. From there, with hands on thighs, allowing the ankle and lower shin to release down towards the floor. Whichever version of the pose you're working with, the spine lifting, the chest open, and the shoulders rolling back. So a number of these poses, if they're ones that are particularly useful for you, you can come back to them another time and stay longer timing. And this pose would benefit from, say, a 5-minute stay. We won't stay that long in today's class, just getting a sense of how to set up the pose and optimize the pose. Let's come out of it now. We'll move from our shins to the calves. We'll use our blocks and a blanket. We're going to now bring the blanket back as it started there. And we'll roll the blanket from the long edge towards the opposing long edge. And we're as tightly as possible, as neatly as possible, rolling that into a tight rolled blanket, which will then place two blocks over on a slanted angle. And then when we press down on the blocks, we just want to make sure that both of those blocks are the same angle. We've got the block set up with the blankets there within arm's reach of the wall. We might need that, we will need it in terms of balancing as we get into the pose. Try not to disturb the blocks as you step one foot and then the other foot up onto the blocks. You've got your toes overlapping the top edge, the highest point on the blocks. That will help you to avoid any slipping with the feet back down with gravity. Hands just can stay to the wall. Try to stay as upright as possible, your shoulders directly over your hips directly over your ankles. It's a version of the standing pose, Tadasana. Assess whether or not you're able to get your heels completely down, making contact with the blocks. If they're lifting off the blocks, if you're getting a stretch in the calf but unable to bring the heels down, it means that the angle of the blocks is too steep. You just need to draw the blocks back a little bit to flatten the angle. Make sure that you can get both a stretch in the calf, but with your heels down. Equally, if you're not getting a stretch in the calf, it means that you've got the blocks too flat. You just need to increase the height of the rolled blanket. And then just look down at your feet. Make sure that your feet are straight. If you've got tight calf muscles, it's quite common for the feet to turn out in this position. Make sure that they're straight. Once the feet are straight, then make contact with the outer heel more firmly down and into the blocks. To get there, we need to a little bit press the shin bone back and lift the kneecaps up. And if we're more specific there, it's the inner shin bone that presses back, the outer heels draw down, and we're lengthening the heels down away from the calves. The calves, as they lengthen, they're spreading from inner leg towards outer leg. Make sure that the back of the pelvis stays in, your tailbone down, and your chest forwards and lifting upwards, the shoulders rolling back. Okay, and then release. So shins, calves, of course the really key one for cycling is the quadriceps and the hip flexors. So let's have a look at those regions of the body now. We'll just remove our blanket and we'll take our chair. Let's have the back of the chair facing the wall. Have the chair positioned there towards the end of the mat. Potentially we might need some padding for the back knee in this pose. What you can do there is place a flat blanket halfway at the halfway point of your yoga mat. If you're not sure, just have it there in case. We're going to be placing the knee down onto the floor. If you've got a hard floor surface, that can be a little bit uncomfortable on the kneecap. Importantly, here we need a nice wide distance between the feet. So we'll have our left foot as the back foot. It's near to the wall, not touching the wall. And we step the right foot out and we've got a gap there between the feet of roughly the length of your leg. The pose won't work as well if the distance is shorter than that. So really check for that, make sure that you're getting that full leg's length distance between the feet. Keeping the feet there in that position, we'll then bend the left knee down onto the blanket. If you've got carpet, you probably won't need the blanket. And the top of the left foot then comes to the floor. The chair, we'll just pull it in so that the feet of the chair are in line with the toes. And then we're able to hold the chair, and quite firmly we can hold the chair. It will help in a moment for this group of muscles here, the quadriceps muscles in the front leg, to release and relax. That's going to allow our hips to both descend and move forwards. And as we do that, we start to get a stretch, a lengthening into the hip flexor of the left leg. So importantly, we need the right quadriceps, the front thigh area there, to release and relax. If it's hard, it's pushing you up and away from the floor. We want the opposite. We want the pelvis to release in a downward and forward direction and release from the knee towards the pelvis. So around the kneecap, let the muscles go. In that bulky area in the mid-thigh, release, let go. Also in the thigh crease where the leg joins into the torso, release there and let go. The more the hips move forwards and downwards, the better the stretch in the hip flexor. As the hips descend, keep turning the left buttock away from the right buttock so that the front of the pelvis faces straight ahead, the back of the pelvis facing directly back to the wall behind you. Okay, and then release and come up. Of course, many of these poses you can repeat several times before moving on to the next yoga pose. So left foot now, the front foot, and we're lunging forwards. Just notice the angle of the front shin. It's not vertical. The knee part of the shin, it slants forwards. And we're encouraging that. The shin bone, we're leaning it forwards and downwards towards the floor. It helps the pelvis to release. And then take as much weight as possible with your arms, with your hands holding the chair, so that the left quadriceps can release and relax. All the way to the pelvis. That left inner groin area, make sure the muscles there are soft. That whole left thigh crease region, soften and let go, release. The right buttock, just move it gently away from the left buttock. The right outer hip, it turns forwards. Again, just so that the front of the pelvis remains facing directly ahead and the back of the pelvis facing straight back towards the wall behind. So we're getting an opening more into the hip flexor area, the muscles there near the front of the hip and working down towards the quadriceps. Not so much a strong stretch at this stage in the quadriceps themselves. Let's see if we can make the pose focus a little more in that region. So we'll come up, and so very similar pose, but we'll make one adjustment to it. We'll do it with the back leg, the back knee bent. We'll still need the padding for the knee, so we'll move that blanket right back to the wall. I'll preempt here that when we place our knee right up against the wall, it's a more challenging stretch for the quadriceps. If that's a tighter area for you, start with your knee, say 10 centimeters, half a foot away from the wall. If you're really stiff, you can have the knee maybe a foot, 20 centimeters or so away from the wall. But I'll be demonstrating it with the knee right to the wall, and it gives a really nice intense stretch into the quadriceps. Bring the chair in closer, not too close. You will need to lean forwards to get into this pose, and if the chair is too close, that will be an obstruction. We start from kneeling. I'll give you a moment just to find this position. For me, my knees are just briefly off the floor. If you've got a hard floor surface, don't panic, you won't be there for a long time. Good just to note where the kneecaps are on the mat, because in a moment we'll be positioning the heel of each foot in that same region of the mat. Before we do though, we'll bring our hands down to the floor and we'll slide the left knee along the floor back towards the wall. So stiffer body, you're stopping short of the wall. For the maximum stretch, you bring your knee all the way to the wall. You've got your toes pointing upwards towards the ceiling. You can just glance back and check for that. The foot is slightly off to the side, so that if we were to bring our body back to the wall, the heel wouldn't come underneath the buttock, it would sit more beside the outer hip. Again, just take note of where the right knee is, because we're now going to walk the hands across to the left side and bring our right heel to that section of the mat where the knee has just been. At that point we can bring the chair in closer, and we're in this preparatory position initially, just getting the pelvis to be level so the front of the pelvis is facing directly ahead, the back of the pelvis facing more towards the wall behind. And then the same action as we've just worked with. We support the body weight with the arm strength. We release and relax the right quadriceps, allowing the pelvis to move in a forward and downward direction. And the stretch now focusing not so much on the hip flexor, a little bit, but more into the bulk of the quadriceps muscle. Keep the chest lifting and moving forwards. Keep the shoulders rolling back. Should be no discomfort in the lower back. If you're getting some pinching in the lower back, just move the chest a little closer to the chair. Now to come out of the pose, we'll bring our hands back to the floor and we'll come back to that kneeling position that we started with. So both toes lightly touching the wall. Just push the chair out a bit so that we can lean forwards. And now we'll do the other side. So hands down to the floor. Slide the knee along the floor towards the wall, stopping a little away from the wall as we've been doing if you've got the stiffer body. And then walk the hands across to the right. Take note of where the left knee is currently positioned on the mat. And then switch over so that the left heel is into that section of the mat. And then bringing the chair that little bit closer in and supporting your body weight with your hands to the chair as you start to lunge the pelvis forwards, away from the wall and down. As the pelvis moves forwards and down, just gently turning the pelvis so that the front of the pelvis faces directly ahead. To do that, the right buttock, it just moves a little bit away from the left buttock, just so that the back of the pelvis can face straight back, the front of the pelvis directly ahead. Left quadriceps, loosen, release. As you look down, the kneecap of the left leg aligns with the toes. We're not aiming here to keep the shin vertical. All right, and then let's bring the hands back down to the floor. We'll come out of the pose via our start position and then come up and move the chair out of the way. This next pose, again, good one for lengthening the hip flexors. Good one also for countering that movement of leaning forwards, as many cyclists do when they're on their bikes, and a nice containing, balancing movement for the lower back now. Chaturpadasana, we'll use both of the blankets and we'll have them unfolded or folded in their shoulder stand fold. This is the way that we're often positioning the blankets in yoga studios, stacking the blankets this way. We'll then neatly stack one blanket on top of the other blanket. Notice how we've got the neat folded edge vertically aligned here, just so that we've got a more clearly defined shape to feel and work with our shoulders and our neck. Our head will be here, our shoulders will be here. With our knees bent, our feet will be here, and we'll be holding with our hands the side edges of the mat. So, lying back, head to the floor, just with your hands, check where your shoulders are relative to the folded edge of the blankets. They should be 2 or 3 centimeters back from the edge, an inch or so back from the edge. From there, have your knees bent, your feet flat, and both hands reach back and grip the side edges of the mat. We're going to do 3 of these. All we're doing is pressing our feet down and lifting our hips up, and we need to be squeezing the buttocks upwards and into the body as we do so. We'll get to that action eventually, but let's start more with the awareness of our feet, making sure that initially your feet are straight, the inner edges of the feet parallel, and then pressing your feet down, lift your hips up. And then just let's redirect our awareness back to the feet, so inner edges of the feet press down, and make sure that your feet have remained straight. Commonly the feet tend to turn out here. So just check that the feet are straight. Press your inner feet down, big toe side, inner feet down, in order to lift your hips higher up. Okay, and then release down. So we're lengthening through that hip flexor area and containing the lower back. Move the sacrum at the back of the pelvis up deeply into the body. This time, if there's some space there, you can walk the feet in slightly closer towards the buttocks as a starting point. Make sure that the feet remain straight. Exhale, and lift up. So feet press down, front thighs turn towards one another. It stops the knees from splaying out. You want the backs of the thighs to spread away from one another. So if you roll your inner thighs down, you can get that adjustment. And then squeezing the buttock flesh up and into the body, it lifts up and squeezes towards the legs as well. So we're squeezing the buttock flesh up and away from the spine. Okay, and then release down. We'll do one more, prioritizing this time the arching in the upper back, so near the base of the neck there, lifting that up and off the blankets, making sure that the spine lifts, the chest, the side ribs lifting. So let's head there now. Check that your feet are straight, the inner edges of the feet press down, and then exhale. Raise your hips up. Press your shoulders down, press your elbows down, and that region of the spine between your shoulder blades, arch it deeply up and into the body, lifting your shoulder blades right off the blankets. Sides of the chest lift up, but keep your abdomen relaxed, the navel releasing down. Okay, and then release down and roll to the side and come up. So a pose there that tends to tighten the gluteal muscles, but in cycling we want to be able to lengthen and release them. So a pose that will now come into that area, the glutes. We'll be using our chair, we'll be sitting in the chair, have the chair facing the wall. It's roughly an arm's length distance away from the wall. Sit in the chair, have your feet together, and then leaving the right leg as it is, we'll lift the left ankle up, and then we'll place the outer ankle on the center line of the right thigh. Just try that. Feel it's just a little bit precarious with the ankle joint directly over the median line of the right leg. But then if we just move the ankle joint slightly towards the inner leg, immediately the foot then becomes more stable. Rather than leaving that left foot relaxed, we'll flex the toes back towards the shin, lengthening the heel away from the calf. Now at this point, if your knee is lifting up away from the floor at a 45-degree angle, we need to increase the height of the seat of the chair. You've got a moment to do it if need be. It's okay if the knee's a little bit higher than the ankle. We don't want a 45-degree angle with the knee lifting up. And that might be the case if you're someone with tight glutes. Once we've established that, we're going to be leaning forwards in a moment, but we don't want to be doing that with our spine sinking and collapsing back down towards the pelvis. So make use of the chair, bring your hands back onto the chair behind you, press them down and lift the spine up. So the back of your pelvis, move it in, from the pubic bone to your navel, lift upwards, and leading with your chest, then bring your hands forwards and to the wall. Keep the toes flexed back towards the shin, keep lengthening the heel away from the calf. Make sure you're not pushing the knee down, just let the knee release and relax. And our target area deep into the right glute and buttock area. Let's try it on the left side. So we'll bring on the right side, we'll bring the right ankle, the outer ankle bone, just slightly to the inside of that median line. Slide the ankle back so that the shin bone more or less parallel to the wall there in front. Just before we go further, just with your hands, you can manually adjust the right thigh here. If you have one hand to the inner thigh, other hand to the outer thigh, and lift the inner thigh up as you turn the outer thigh down. Feel how that helps to get more of an outward rotation in the hip, and that's just going to take some strain off the knee. We don't want too much of a twist in the knee in this pose. But another good reason for not having the knee too high. If you're sitting on extra blankets, that should help just to keep the knee down more in line with the ankle. The other thing we can do to avoid twisting in the knee, we've already been working with it, that action of flexing the toes back towards the shin and lengthening the heel away from the calf. keeping the leg that way, we lift the spine and chest up, and then coming forwards with the hands, not so important the hands coming to the wall and walking down the wall, more important that they come to the wall and walk up the wall. So walk the hands as high as possible up the wall. Keep the back of the pelvis moving in, pubic bone to navel lifting up. Your back ribs moving towards the wall, your chest lifting upwards towards your hands. Okay, and then release, and let's move the chair out of the way. And another pose for getting into that similar area, we'll need some blanket support here, potentially 2 blankets. So let's have both of our blankets folded. We'll bring them back to this fold as a starting point. Rather than folding them in half from there, we'll do a 3-fold. So a 3-fold in one direction and then the opposite direction, so that we get a blanket folded this way. We'll have that blanket, both blankets folded that way, within reach of the right side of the mat. So 2 3-fold blankets within reach of the right side of the mat. If you know that you've got stiffer glutes, hips, if you were sitting on extra height in that previous pose, maybe have a block within reach in addition to those 2 blankets. Our starting point will be downward facing dog pose. We'll just be very briefly in the pose, and then we're going to be lunging the right knee so that it comes to the part of the mat where the right hand is currently positioned, like so. So we lay the outside of the right shin to the floor, the angle of the shin, the right shin, 45 degrees relative to the end of the mat. We've got, as we look down there, the right knee slightly wider than the hip, not directly in front of it. You've got your hands to the floor there supporting your body weight. We do want the right hip to come down, but not if that makes the left hip lift up. So that's where the blankets come into play. We'll put one of those 3-fold blankets under the right sitting bone. It should help you to be able to release fully down onto that support without the left hip lifting. Use both of the blankets if need be. If there's some tightness there, then just to keep the hips level, use both of the blankets and a block. Make sure that the right heel isn't coming underneath the front of the pelvis here. It sits in front of the pelvis. And then we can come down onto the elbows and the forearms looking forwards. The left inner groin, it turns upwards away from the floor. The left buttock, it turns away from the right buttock. The pubic bone, it turns to the right side. The right thigh crease, it cuts back into the body, towards the wall behind you. Chest moves forwards. Okay, and then let's press back to dog pose. Bend the knees down, move the blanket or the blankets or whatever support you were using there across to the left-hand side of the mat. Press back to dog pose just briefly, and then we'll be lunging the left leg forwards, knee wider than the hip, the right leg extends back straight. Blanket under the sitting bone of the left leg. Now, if you can easily reach the floor without your right hip slanting up, you won't need the blanket. And then just allowing the hips to settle, left hip down without the right hip flaring up. And then forearms to the floor, looking directly ahead. Right inner groin lift, right buttock away from the left buttock. Right outer hip forwards and down. Pubic bone across to the left side. Left thigh crease, cut it back and into the body. The chest forwards. Okay, and then we'll press back to dog pose briefly. Knees down to the floor. Let's have a blanket now nearby, and we'll do a similar pose, but from a reclining position. It will work into similar release of that gluteal muscle group. We've got the left knee bent up towards the chest. And then, as we did a moment ago when we were sitting on the seat of the chair, we're going to place the right outer ankle just slightly to the inside of the median line, the center line of the left leg. The ankle is slightly down from the knee, it's in the front of the thigh, not the knee region. If you look at the legs, there's that triangular space between the right and the left leg. We reach the right arm through that space, and then with both hands we're holding the left shin, the fingers interlocked around the head of the shin. You need to lift your head off the floor to a degree that's working your abdominal muscles and the throat as well. And then as you bend your elbows, you're bringing the right ankle closer into the face, with your right elbow gently pressing the knee away from the body. The right outer hip, it moves away from the torso towards the wall. The right hip, it's contained inwards towards the left hip. Okay, and then release, and we'll change. Left ankle onto the right thigh, and then reaching up, fingers interlocked around the head of the right shin bone. Hug the ankle in closer to the face, with the left knee resist the knee away from the shoulders. Left outer hip towards the wall. The left hip socket, we're containing it towards the right hip socket. Okay, and then release down. So just as a final pose, we'll work now with the hamstrings. We'll do it from a reclining position. We'll bend the right knee into the chest. We'll place the belt. It can be either in a large loop or the belt completely undone. And we'll place the belt just under the ball of the right leg. It's not important what angle the right leg is. Good if you're getting a stretch into the hamstring. It's more important that the knee remains straight. We'll pull down firmly with the belt and press up with the foot into the belt so that the big toe base of that right foot lifts up. And again, pressing the foot into the belt in order to straighten and open the right knee. The kneecap should be firm here, not loose. And pressing up into the belt and moving that right outer hip towards the wall. And then as the hamstring starts to give a little, it might be an option just to bend the elbows slightly to the side, allow the leg to come further over. But as the foot comes away from the wall with the knees straight, the thigh crease, right thigh crease, it moves towards the wall. Keep your left thigh pressing down, keep your left foot pressing into the wall. Okay, and then we'll release and we'll change sides. Placing the belt under the ball of the left foot. Resist with the belt, press with the foot against the belt, lift the big toe base up, open the back of the left knee, pressing into the belt, move the left outer hip towards the wall. You'll feel the whole left side of the pelvis move away from the torso. It's a nice release for the lower back as well as a lengthening pose for the hamstrings. As the hamstrings start to give, if they give, the option of bringing the leg over that little bit further so the elbows can bend as you do that. Foot comes away from the wall, the left thigh crease, it moves towards the wall. Keep your right thigh pressing down and your right foot pressing firmly into the wall. Okay, and then release. We'll do a short shavasana to finish. Have a blanket for your head, half fold blanket for your head, and take your extra blanket as covering to keep yourself warm if you need it. Arms out by the sides, palms facing up. Got your ankles a little bit wider than hip width. The arms are out to the side, roughly 30 degrees away from the upper torso. Make sure your shoulders tuck under, side ribs lifting up. Make sure that the back of the neck has some length to it. Don't overly straighten it. We're not pulling the chin in towards the throat. Equally, we want the forehead to be just a fraction higher than the chin, comfortably so. We retain the natural curvature at the back of the neck, the natural curvature in the lower back. Just let your legs completely relax, the feet will turn out to the sides. And let the whole body release and relax down into the floor, particularly as you as you exhale. Common for the body to relax, but there's still to be residual gripping, holding in the facial muscles. Check there, be systematic, check the jaw region, and see if by relaxing the jaw muscles something else becomes evident and relaxes. It might be the tongue, it could be the eye region, the throat region, the sense of the skin, the facial skin gravitating down onto the contours of the skull, particularly as you breathe in. Let that skin loosen and drape back onto the contours of the body. It's not just in the face, in the throat as well. As you breathe in, throat relaxed, let the skin there in the throat region drape back over the contours of the inner body. So that each time you breathe in, the chest can expand, but without tightness appearing in the throat. Smooth, soft inhalation, smooth, soft exhalation. Okay, and then let's take a couple of slightly deeper in-breaths. And then from there, bend your knees, feet flat to the floor. Bring your hands across your chest or abdomen. Eyes open. And from there you can roll to the side and come up as you're ready. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.